Executive Managing Editor of Black Enterprise, and welcome to Take the Stress Out of Money, Planning for Financial Peace. We've got too many experts here with us today who are going to help us do just that. So please welcome Roslyn Glenn. She's the president and CEO of Destiny Wealth Advisors and Consulting, and she's also a prudential advisor. Roslyn, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about the conversation.
And we also have Angela Yee, who of course we all know as the award-winning host of iHeartRadio's The Breakfast Club, but she's also a huge advocate of financial literacy. So Angela, thanks for being here.
Thank you. That sounded good too. Award-winning. Thank you.
We got to take our own flowers sometimes, you know? So I want to start with putting this into some context about the stress that everyone is feeling financially. There was prudential research that showed that 57% of employees were either somewhat or very stressed about their financial situation. And the top three reasons for that were saving for the future, paying their monthly bills, and credit card debt. But that was even before the pandemic hit us. This year, in the middle of it, in May, Prudential did another survey, and they found that 48% of all Americans and 56% of Black and Latino Americans were worried about their financial future. So this may sound like a silly question, but why is money such a stressful topic for everyone? Roslyn, I'm going to start with you.
It makes the world go round, right? It's what we need to educate our children, to have roofs over our head, to have clothes on our backs. It's what we need. It is the commodity that society has deemed what we need in order to live. And that does create stress because so many of us don't have a right relationship with money, and we don't have a right mindset about it. And I think that's what we have to work towards, is changing our mindset about money so that we can use it as a resource, the resource that it is, and not use it as things that help make us feel good, because it does make us feel good when we can buy the things that we like. However, having that right relationship with money kind of has to come into, be upfront before we can actually start thinking about that, right?
Angela, why is everybody so stressed?
I think that sometimes we feel a bit ashamed of some of the decisions that we make, and we look at that as like a reflection of how responsible we are as people. And the truth of the matter is, a lot of us also didn't grow up with that education being handed down to us. We weren't raised. I think we're also taught all the time, we're really bad with money. And that's just simply not true. We just have to learn how to educate ourselves. There's so many resources out there for us. And I just think about even like my mom growing up, she would always like buy things, but then hide them in the car until my dad wasn't home or went to sleep. And then she would sneak them in the house. And then he would say, "Where did this come from? I don't remember you having this." She's like, "Oh no, I had this for a while." And so it's just the kind of thing where you're secretly buying things that you shouldn't perhaps be buying. And then sometimes you splurge and it's not the most responsible decision, but a lot of times those decisions are made because it just, like you said, makes us feel good. And I know I was a victim of that for so long. And so I think it's just a hard discussion for people to have, because people look at our credit score as a reflection. Sometimes we don't even want to know what that credit score is. And we're scared to see how we can even fix those things, to be able to face that and say, okay, let me put together a plan on how I can make myself feel more confident and more comfortable.
I'm so glad you brought like your childhood into this, because I think a big reason for the stress is that a lot of people aren't aware of like how they feel about money, the things that have played out in their families over time. And I know for me growing up, most of my money lessons were about like the envelopes in the drawer. My parents were big on, budgeting and not overspending. So I knew you had this much money set aside for this and this much, and you put it aside. But I always got the message that like, credit is dangerous, like something to stay away from. So Angela, what are some of the things that you think you absorbed, like the money mindsets that you weren't necessarily aware of as you were growing up?
Well, always saving for the future. My grandfather used to always tell me, save your money, buy a house, save your money, buy a house. And that was like his favorite phrase for me. And he was telling me that probably since I was like 8 years old. And so it always has been ingrained in me that it was always important for me to have a house or some place where I could retire. And that's not something I thought about until I bought my first house. And my grandfather had already passed away by then. And the first thing I thought was, I wish my grandfather was here to see me doing this, because this was something he told me. You know, he's West Indian, and that's a very big, like, he bought a house and left that house for my mom when he moved back to the West Indies. And so the reason even why my mom and dad had a house that was in their name was because my grandfather gave her the house, and then they were able to sell that house and move to New Jersey from Flatbush in Brooklyn. And so that was one thing I feel like I've always said to myself, I have to buy a house. I have to buy a house.
Roslyn, is that something that you see with people that you advise, that they're not always aware of the mindsets that they might have subconsciously about money, or the patterns that have played out, in their families or even in their own lives?
Absolutely. And it goes both ways, right? So if you come from, a family of means and you've always had what you needed, then you get a perspective about money. And it's not always the right perspective, because you think I can just go and buy and do whatever I want to do without having a plan, versus on the other side, somebody that is, maybe comes from, a place of lack or not having enough. They have a mindset of money, that I've got to have it in order to help my self-esteem or to be like everybody else. When I was growing up, I didn't wear it was Jordache jeans and the members only jackets then, right? That was not happening with me and my family, because we didn't have the means to do that. I had clean clothes, I had what I needed, and my parents always made sure that I knew that. And that I was taken care of. The fact of the matter is, I was poor, but I didn't know I was poor because of how my family raised me. So it happens on both ends of the spectrum, and it still comes back to a mindset about money. When Angela was talking, I was thinking about that adage that says, we spend money we don't have to buy things we don't need to impress people we don't even like. And so we've got to make sure that the mindset about money and about how we feel about it is right, so that we can manage it and come up with a plan in order to set our future for our families and build legacy. Because at the end of the day, that is what it's about. Her grandparents taught her that, and that's about a legacy that they left for her parents. And now she's taking that on, and it goes on down for generations. And that's what we've got to do as a community of people, is to think about the legacies that we've got to build.
I want to talk for a minute about the emotions surrounding money and our relationship with money. Angela, you mentioned earlier shame, which I think is a big one. And I think we first spoke to you back in 2012 about your financial journey. You were talking about overcoming $30,000 worth of credit card debt. And you said, being in debt is depressing. And then a couple of years ago, you were a guest on the Your Money, Your Life podcast, sponsored by Prudential. And you talked about not opening up your credit card bills when you were in college because it was so nerve wracking. And I just love how candid you always are about the emotions that go behind these financial decisions. Like, can you talk about your emotional journey with money?
Yes, I mean, I think that has always been something that was so stressful for me. Like I said, my grandfather was always talking about buying a house. I never thought I would be able to. I live in New York. You know how expensive it is to buy something in New York anyway. And then I never was making enough money. So I was always living check to check, but I was always living beyond my means. And so it was me wanting to always go out to eat dinner, me wanting to go on these little vacations, me wanting to buy new clothes so I could go out. And those things really definitely do add up. And so for myself, I never was comfortable. Like I promise you, every single night when I would get in bed, I would be thinking about money and how I didn't have any and how would I be able to survive. And I remember getting laid off from a job and getting unemployment for the first time. And that was like, that's not a lot of money compared to when I had a job and I was bringing in more money. But it definitely gave me some time to like restructure myself, think about what it was that I wanted to do, cut back on the things that I was spending money on that I didn't need to. And I will say, like during coronavirus, all of the things I used to like to buy, I have barely spent any money at all on clothes. I don't even go shopping. Like usually I would have to go places, and every time I have to go somewhere, I have to go buy something, like something different to wear. And I have all these clothes I don't even wear at home already. And then I'm like, oh, I don't like how that looks anymore. But now I'm just in like a sweatsuit every day. Truthfully, these are pajamas.
Well, I love that. And I love that you're saving money. I mean, coronavirus really is a chance for everyone to reset about everything, including like our relationship with money. Roslyn, how much of people's emotional state goes into like their decision making when it comes to their finances, do you find?
It's hard conversations to have with people, right? When my clients come in, and the first thing we discuss is, I just say, tell me where you are financially, what's going on with you. And they never start out telling the truth. That's been my experience. They never start out telling the truth until they know that I'm a safe place, and that they can open up and be honest, and know that I tell them this is a no judgment zone. We can have an open conversation. I can't help you if you don't tell me the truth. And I mean the whole truth, because if you give me partial information, I'm going to advise you on that partial information, which may impact something else that you have done down the road, or, in the past. And so emotions are really, it drives us financially. We make emotional decision, and every spending decision, in my opinion, is an emotional decision, because you're deciding what you're going to do with that dollar. I say every dollar that comes into your hand needs to have an assignment. And that's how the plan starts. If this dollar comes, you're going to pay the mortgage. This dollar comes, you're going to pay the light bill. This dollar comes, you're going to pay the child's education. You have to give it an assignment. But if you don't have all of that stuff in right perspective, then you don't make the right assignments. If you don't feel good about yourself and where you are, then you give your money assignments to help you feel good about yourself. And it's usually then not spent to help you build wealth. We think about money in terms of income and expenses, when we really should be thinking about it in terms of assets and liabilities, because it's net worth at the end of the day that matters. And it's net worth that's going to help us to sustain our communities.
Do you think that they're also not telling the truth to themselves? I mean, they come in and they don't tell you the truth, but like, I think most of us don't tell ourselves the truth about money.
I agree. And it is a hard conversation, which is why, I spend more time. I'm a financial advisor by profession, but I'm a psychologist also, because you have to really deal with all of those emotions that cause people to spend money, because no amount of planning, and I'm really good at putting together plans, but people won't follow the plan if they don't have a right mindset and the right emotions around that plan. And so I can put it together, but they're going to alter that plan if they're not feeling good about themselves and about the decisions and about where they are. And so I spend a large part of my time at the beginning of my sessions, just helping people to get to a good place about themselves. Wherever you are, it's okay, because all of us have stories that we can tell about where we've been. I've had the college debt as well. I've had the student loan debt as well. I've made the bad decisions because I wanted to kind of hang out with folk who had way more money than me, but I wanted to give the appearance that I had it too, and I didn't. And I created some challenges for myself until I got a right perspective about it. And so you have to give people that space to know and understand that we all have that story to some extent, and not judge them for it. You're not going to be judged for your decision. What you will be judged for is not making better decisions.
That's such a good point. I think that all of the emotions surrounding money, including stress, can be overcome. And Angela, you're a really great example of that, because you've now gone on to become a homeowner, as you mentioned, a real estate investor, as you own multiple homes, and a business owner. And all of those individually are stressful financial decisions. I remember when I was buying my first home, I went to bed crying a lot of nights, to be honest, because there were places I went and fell in love with, and I was like, I don't know if I can afford it. Or, suddenly, there were another $10,000 in closing costs that I didn't know that I had to come up with. Like there's so much of the process that we're just like unfamiliar with, and it's really, really stressful. So like, how did you manage the stress that came with those new ventures in your life?
You know, truthfully, I just closed on another house like 3 weeks ago, and it was not what I expected. It was, I started off with a way lower budget, and then it went up and up and up. As I kept seeing things like, well, maybe I want that instead. You know what? Maybe I can stretch it to this. And then after I closed, I found out these laws. They didn't tell me ahead of time that you have to install a sprinkler system, in the house, which I didn't know. And that alone is $40,000 estimated that I did not anticipate. And then when you do that, you also have to go into the ceiling, and that's going to destroy all the original moldings that I was excited about. And I'm like, wow, all of these things that I didn't anticipate and I wasn't even aware of until after I closed on the house. But what I had to tell myself is I look at money so different now that I've been investing. And so right now I look at it as I'm strategically struggling, and because because I like to put myself in these positions where financially I made like a great investment, but I won't have that extra cash flow for a little while. But I don't mind that because I know why I don't have that, and I'm working towards something. And I also look at money differently. As before, I used to always want to have money just on hand, save it up in the bank. And now I look at it as if I have too much money in the bank, then it's not working. And I need my money to work for me. So that's just a different mindset that I've had. And I have multiple different investments. Like I've started investing in the stock market a few years ago. I have my retirement plans, I have my life insurance, and then I have all these different properties. And like, I bought a condo last year in Williamsburg that pays for itself. I paid off my mortgage in January for the house I live in now, and it's a 2-family house. I just bought a new brownstone that, once I finish doing the renovations, I'll be able to move into that. And then I own 2 homes in Detroit. And so I'm also starting a business in Detroit. In about 2 weeks, it'll be open. And so, there's all these different things that I have going on. And sometimes that investment period and the payoff period can be so long, but you just have to be really patient.
Did you have like help, like someone to hold your hand financially through that stress? Because that's a lot of stuff.
You know what? I think that I've kind of been learning a lot of this as I go along, but I talk to people all the time who I trust. And I talk to people who have done similar things just to get their advice, but I do trust myself, and I do a lot of research also. And so I do think it's important to have people who are financial experts that you can actually go to and get advice from. And even to me, it's worth it for me to pay somebody for them to actually make me more money. I'm never against that. And it's also good for me to partner with people on businesses. And so that's what I've been doing. And it's been really helpful for me. And so, like I said, it's just a matter of patience. Like when we opened the juice bar, it didn't make money for the first couple of years, and it was just an investment. And now things have finally turned. I think sometimes people think I'm going to invest in this and make some money right away. And it just doesn't happen like that.
So Roslyn, you mentioned that, even though you're a financial advisor by trade, you are really a psychologist in many ways. When you've got clients there sitting on your couch, what is the advice you give them in order to be able to take some of the stress out of this for them?
Well, it's about a plan, right? Everything as it relates to money, in my opinion, is about having a plan. You can do anything in the world that you want to do as long as you have a plan. And most of the time, I say a spending plan versus a budget, because when you say the word budget, most people start thinking restricting, and a budget tells me what I can't do. And I challenge people to think about that differently, because a budget actually tells you what you can do and when you can do it. And you need to have that plan. I'm listening to Angela with all that she's done. You have to have a plan, and it has to start with the basic foundation of that emergency savings, because any investment doesn't generally start off making you a profit. And so you've got to be able to sustain yourself, which is why we start with having an emergency savings in place. And once you have that emergency savings, a lot of my young clients now, they come to me and they want to get right into investing right away. And I say, well, do you have 6 to 9 months worth of emergency expenses? Do you have that? And if they say no, then I'm like, we're not even talking about investing until you get that, because investing, you can lose money. Saving is not the same as investing, right? They are two totally different things. We think about them the same, but they're not, because saving, generally, you don't lose any of your principal. Investing in anything, whether it's real estate, stocks, bonds, whatever it is, you put yourself at risk in doing that. And so in order to make sure that you have a stable foundation, you've got to have that cushion. Opening a business, the statistics show that you don't generally turn a profit in a new business, sometimes between 3 and 5 years. If you make it past the 5 years, then you have done really well. And so you've got to be able to make sure that you can sustain yourself while you're opening up that business. And so I'm having those kinds of conversations with my clients, and having them to be honest about where they are, because even with this COVID environment that we're in, some of my clients have come back to me and said, Roz, I really wish I would have done what you advised me to do, 2 or 3 years ago, because, when COVID hit, 2 weeks in, and some people were really panicking because they did not have that savings. And then when we are still now 8 months in and we still don't know really what's going to happen, our community has been the hardest hit by this, because we don't manage properly in a lot of instances. And that starts with, really saving money and having, that cushion there to be able to help you to sustain yourself when the lean times come, because they do come. We have harvest times, and we like the harvest times, but the harvest times come so that we can store up for the lean times that are sure to come also.
I was so grateful when coronavirus hit that in January, I paid off my mortgage for my house that I live in now. And people were telling me not to do that. It's not a good idea. But I also know myself and my spending habits and what makes me comfortable and what makes me sleep better at night. And so for my birthday, I paid off this mortgage, and I was so grateful that I did it, because when the pandemic did hit, I didn't feel as panicked in case I didn't know what was going to happen, but at least I knew I had a house to live in. And then I also have a house in Detroit that's completely paid for, that I always am like, if all else fails, I know I'll have some money because I could sell this, and I still have that house.
That is such a good point, and a great thing. I mean, I love that for your own birthday gift to yourself. You're like, I'm gonna pay off my mortgage. I mean, I don't think we think about treating ourselves well, financially in that sense. One of the things you said before in the past, Angela, that stuck with me is that people need to get help with their finances, not just when they get money. Like, a lot of people are like, I don't need an advisor or a planner or whatever because I don't have any money. But that it's especially when they don't have money that they need that help. Can you explain that?
Yeah, and I was really fortunate that we had, when I used to work at Sirius, and that was like maybe 14 years ago, that I was having a conversation with someone who was a financial advisor. And I was like, look, I'm living check to check. I can't invest anything. And he was breaking it down for me about, taking money out of my paycheck for it to go directly into a savings plan. And we talked about the matching plan that we had at work with the 401k, having a Roth IRA pre-tax, and you don't even notice the money that's gone. And that was so true. And it's certain amounts you can take out. Like, I think I was doing $200 a month, and pre-tax, you don't even really notice that. And so for myself, I was so glad I did it, because you do get more confidence as that money starts to build up, and you feel like, okay, oh, look at my little, look at my savings growing and growing and growing. And then years later, it pays off so much. Whereas if I hadn't started it back then, I wouldn't have that chunk of money now. And it was so important for me to do that, because while at that time in my head, I didn't feel like I had the ability to be able to do something like save for my retirement, I really did. And it was just a matter of being shown how to do that, because that's probably not anything I would have even considered.
Rosalind, Angela just talked about, the people who don't think that they're at that place yet. And I think having a financial planner is a lot like a budget. As you said, a budget tells you what you can do, not what you can't do. And a financial planner gives you the plan so that you're ready when a crisis happens, or that, you can lay down at night and go to sleep without worrying about it. Can you talk about the role of a financial planner in helping people like take the uncertainty and the stress out of their money?
Absolutely. It's the education piece, right? There are rules and regulations around investing, whether it's in real estate or stocks. There are rules around how you manage your life insurance. There are rules around how you manage your retirement account, when you can take it, when you should take it. All of that matters. And if you don't know those rules and you make a decision, I have had clients that came to me after they made the decision, and it was after they lost 40 to 50% of their retirement because they didn't know how to take it and how to roll it over properly or how to manage it properly. And then we had to kind of backtrack and figure all of that out. So education is key. And shameless plugs, everybody needs a financial advisor. It doesn't matter what level of income you are on, you are going to have to make a decision when you retire. If you've been fortunate enough to put money in a 401k and you've accumulated, well, now comes the point of distribution. Well, how do you distribute that so that it becomes your paycheck? And how do you do that, for the rest of your life? So everybody needs to work with a financial advisor. And I'll also say here that, an insurance salesman is not a financial advisor. You need to make sure that you know the credentials of the people that you're working with, because unfortunately people do and will present themselves with credentials that they do not have, and the experience or education that they do not have, and they may give you misinformation that you will make decisions on, because I've had to clean up a lot of those situations too, particularly in our community where, they talk to Big Mama or they talk to Uncle Joe and he said he did it this way. And once they found out or realized how it needed to be done, it helped them out more so than anything. So the education piece is real important, and working with a financial advisor, with someone who will look out for your best interest, because that is another very critical part of working with the financial advisor. It has got to be somebody who has a fiduciary responsibility to look out for your best interest and not their own. All of that matters, but everybody does in fact need to work with a financial advisor in order to understand the rules of money, and they change every day.
We've been talking for most of the time today about, really good basics about, your relationship with money. And as we wrap up though, I want to be able to give people some tips that are actionable, like especially right now. This year has been unprecedented. We've had multiple pandemics. If you're a brown person in America, it's not just coronavirus, but, the Black Lives Matter movement, and so many other things that have affected our money. Now the election, and I think that if anybody didn't understand anxiety, going a week almost without knowing,
Right.
you understood that that uncertainty equals anxiety. So what is your best tip to help people deal with anxiety specifically when it comes to their money?
Is to have a plan, and to do what I said earlier, to give your money an assignment. It doesn't matter how much it is. You know what your needs are. Have a clear distinction between what your needs are versus what your wants are. And I think, COVID has helped us all make that delineation. We know what we need versus what we thought we needed, because we figured out that we can do without some things during this COVID environment. So really having a spending plan and giving your money an assignment, taking the time to just sit down and write it out. It's not in your head, it is on a piece of paper, so that you know what your income is. And I'm talking about what you have coming into your hands, not what you think you're gonna get, what you're expecting to come in, but what is actually in your hands on a monthly basis, and what actually is expected, what you're obligated to send out of your hands on a monthly basis. Start there and know the answers to those questions of what your income is and what your expenses are, and then build from there with whatever other plans that you want to make. If you want to buy a home and there's some disposable income, then we can give the rest of that money an assignment towards saving for a home. If it's educating your child, then we can give that disposable income an extra assignment to educate your child. But it has to start with the basics of having a plan.
Angela, as someone who has walk the path now, yourself, what is your best tip for overcoming financial anxiety?
It is kind of along those same lines, and that is just to face it head on and not to avoid what it is that okay, this is like a cloud over my head and I'm so stressed about it. Sometimes the best thing to do is when those creditors are calling you or you're getting that mail, open that mail, talk to the creditors, work it out. It's the same thing as having a plan and set goals. And I'm really big on setting a goal for myself. I'll be like, okay, by this time, I want to make sure I have X amount of dollars saved up. How can I do that? Multiple streams of income has always been great for me. And so just figure it out, because sometimes it's not that you can just save more money. Sometimes you need to make more money and you have to figure out how to make that happen. And that's something that I'm always trying to figure out, like, okay, how can I, even cut back on some things? Look at what you're spending and look at maybe the cable package. You have to rethink that. Maybe your cell phone bill. Maybe you can look at that and see, okay, well, I can get a better rate on this, or I can, switch my plan. I know I just recently looked at what I was paying for my homeowner's insurance and my car insurance and bundled that and saved a bunch of money. And so it's just always looking at what you're spending and figuring out ways to cut those costs, and then figuring out ways to make more money at the same time. There's a lot of opportunities available now also if you're really creative about it.
Well, thank you, ladies, so much for the good advice. We are going to leave here facing our finances head on and making a plan and sticking to it, so that we can take a lot of the stress out of this and turn our money mindsets around, to work for us. Thank you both.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for having us.